Okay, so the time is now 10:32. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Prospecting for New International Clients webinar brought to you by Business West. My name is Mark, and I work for the international team here at Business West. Before we start today's webinar, here are some housekeeping points. If you're having any technical difficulties, please type them into the chat function and I will endeavour to help. If you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A tab and we will read them out at the end. We'll try our best to get through all of the questions, but those we're unable to answer, we will follow up post-event. And finally, please note that this webinar will be recorded. I'm now pleased to introduce Richard Palmer from SureTrain, who will be running today's webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Prospecting for International Clients run by myself, Richard Palmer from SureTrain. And we're a sales training organisation working closely with the Department for International Trade and Business West across the Southwest and the rest of the country, bringing sales skills, ideas, tips and tricks out to everyone that's looking for them. So let's start looking at the Prospecting Skills Program. So Mark's going to throw up a couple of polls as we go through this particular screen. What I want to start with is a question. So why should we be prospecting? Why should we prospect for new business on a continuous basis out to our international market? Well, one specific reason is that we know that, particularly in the current climate, that there are a lot of businesses out there, both domestically and internationally, who are currently considering their position when it comes to their suppliers, when they're talking about the people that they're working with. Many companies are going through an analysis process, looking at their business and looking at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and who is supporting them in that process. And it's been my experience over the last 2 or 3 months that many companies are taking this opportunity to change suppliers, somebody who's more fit for purpose for the way their business is set up going forwards into the future. So right now, right here, right now is the ideal time to be prospecting for new customers. The second reason we should be prospecting at the moment is simply because marketing is, whilst it's a very effective way of finding new clients, there is nothing more effective than direct action of putting yourself in a situation where you can create an opportunity to do business. And prospecting in all its various forms needs to happen to ensure that you have that continuous flow of pipeline new business coming through into the company. Because of course, if we don't prospect and we purely rely on marketing and we purely rely on our existing customers, at some stage, our curve of new business is going to start to tail off. Now, we won't see that as we speak at the moment, but it will happen at some point in the future. So we need to be prospecting to continually add new opportunities into the pipeline to keep our business growing. But when we are prospecting, we need to create a culture of prospecting. Prospecting is no good when it is an activity that is taken, indulged in when it's an emergency, when we can see our new businesses dropping off. Many companies that I deal with will prospect when they have to, as opposed to as being part of their natural, habitual, day-to-day working process. Those companies that do have a culture of prospecting, that do work on their prospecting every week effectively, are the ones that you see that are having exponential growth. You can see that they're developing their new business drive all the way through. Whereas those that are just doing it when it's necessary tend to have this boom and bust of new business, which is no good for continuous cash flow and no good for profitability. But also it's to secure our position as we speak, as we are now, secure our companies and to grow them into the future. Prospecting is an essential part of that growth. We cannot just rely on marketing and word of mouth alone. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at today. We'll look at some core prospecting activities. We're going to look at the challenges of prospecting internationally and how those are different to the UK prospecting. We're going to discuss preparation for international prospecting, how we get to the stage of being able to pick up the phone or write a letter or knock on a door. And stage one of that will be target data development. Then stage two is prospecting contact and effective decision maker communications. So we're going to look at how are we going to get in touch with people, the various different methods of prospecting. But then once we have got a conversation, how are we going to make it as effective as possible and turn it into something that is going to progress to the next stage, be it an appointment of some kind? And then we're going to have a quick discussion about effective follow-up to make sure that we're making the most of everything that we are putting into the pipeline. We're also going to discuss making time for prospecting and creating that culture to ensure that we're doing it on a regular basis in order to drive that continuous funnel of new business and avoid the boom bust that we've just been talking about. And we're going to look at how we're going to measure it and how we're going to manage it to make sure that we're continually developing our prospecting skills and getting better and better all the time. And at the end, I'll encourage you to put together an action plan to make sure that you've got something to put into place as soon as we finish this program. Okay, so we're going to talk about some core prospecting activities. And for me, there are these key ones. First of all, telephone prospecting. Everybody's worst nightmare, but to be honest with you, one of the most effective ways of prospecting, even now. We're going to talk about prospecting through LinkedIn, using direct mail for prospecting, which again is a highly effective method as we speak. And we're going to have a quick conversation about using email for prospecting, door knocking where it's possible, and networking for generating those prospecting opportunities. So those are the 6 areas of prospecting that we're going to look through. But before we do that, I'd like to discuss what the unique challenges of international prospecting are. Now, for me, you may tell me if you wish via chat if you think there are others that we can add on this, but for me there are the key ones: language, culture, time zones, target data, in-country competition. Okay, so those are the 5 that I think we're going to particularly struggle with when it comes to prospecting internationally. So I'm just going to unshare my keynote here, and we're going to put up let's have a look. Let's have a whiteboard. Okay. All right. So can I just have, Mark, would you mind giving me a quick thumbs up that you can see the whiteboard, please?
All good, Richard.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thinking about language when it comes to prospecting, I'm going to kind of throw this out open to people in the chat. If you wouldn't mind throwing some answers at me. Language is obviously an issue when it comes to prospecting, in as much as naturally we can prospect to English-speaking countries relatively easily, and we have to accept, of course, that a large proportion of the world does deal in English as a business language. However, when it comes to dealing with those people whose English is not first language, what tactics could we use in order to overcome the language issue in prospecting? Somebody type in some ideas for me if you wouldn't mind, and we'll chat about them. Anybody got any thoughts? Okay, well, let's start off with one here. Okay, so Vanessa's saying 2 messages, one in English and one in the target language. Yeah, and which is great if you are bilingual in terms of conversation, but taking that idea from Vanessa is putting it into the written word. Okay, so we have an issue, of course. I like telephone prospecting. Now, as soon as you start telephone prospecting, you run up against this language barrier. Leaflets that have been translated, charts, figures, pictures, fantastic. What it means is where we've got a language issue, we need to resort to written. We need to resort to visual prospecting processes. So here we're talking about direct mail. We're talking about email. Potentially, we're talking about LinkedIn using Google Translate or something similar in order to translate our standard message into the language that we're trying to project through. So That's one key way we could do it. Are there any other thoughts as to how we might overcome the language issue? No? Okay, no problem. Use a translator. Yeah, absolutely, Deborah. Yeah, you could use a translator. The question is, yeah, absolutely. The problem that you've got there is that when it comes to sales, it's the interaction and the conversation between two people that really makes the difference as to whether that prospect moves forward into the process. And I think when you're using a translator, you're going to really struggle with creating that. So maybe at some point, once you've got the prospect into an appointment situation, a translator would become much more viable. But I wouldn't have thought, not from gaining that appointment, because we need to be very reactive. Again, we could go for a local rep, somebody in country to develop that for us. Yes, definitely. The question is there one of balancing that cost to the benefit of market penetration. Are we going to get enough market penetration to warrant the cost of a local distributor? Okay, so the next thing that comes along with language is culture. Culture throws up a lot of different issues when it comes to prospecting, particularly the kind of things that work in the UK here may not work in cultures which are highly organized, highly regimented. So we're talking about things like the Chinese market, for instance, potentially Japanese markets, where there is a lot of respect and deference which is given. However, we tend in the UK, well, certainly I do, I hope maybe you do too, is we tend to be quite relaxed, we tend to be quite informal, whereas in some cultures, formality is more required. So tell me, has anybody actually investigated sources of information regarding culture and behaviors in various countries when it comes to sales? And if so, okay, great, Vanessa. Any particular books that you could recommend to the group? Okay, no problem. Right, the simple thing here is research the culture, adapt behavior accordingly, respect the culture in country. And I think this is absolutely vital when it comes to understanding the way that we should approach things. So rather than just going straight into it and trying to behave in the way that we would do in this country, we've got to be able to adapt these behaviors and make sure that we are behaving in such a way that becomes attractive to each of these cultures that we're dealing in. Okay, and yes, Vanessa, International Chamber of Commerce would be very useful. As you say, Foreign Trade Department. There are so many sources of information and people who are experienced in dealing with those countries. The other thing, of course, is that you could reach out through your LinkedIn network to discover other people in your network who may have dealt with those countries and can give you some real insight into the way that they behave in each section. So local commercial attaché, perfect person, because they will be ingrained within the culture of that business, of that country, sorry. Okay, brilliant. Right. Time zones is another one. It's pretty obvious what we're going to do about that. We're either going to get no sleep because we want to deal with Australia, or we're going to sleep at different times because of these time zone differences. But of course, one of the advantages of non-verbal prospecting is that we can do that anytime. We can set up automations. We can set emails to be delivered at certain times. We can set LinkedIn messages to be delivered at certain times, even whilst we're asleep. So make use of the automations in order to ensure that your prospecting into countries where time zones are difficult isn't affected, and at the same time, your lifestyle is not affected as you
Richard, the whiteboard isn't coming up properly.
Is it not?
Oh, it is now. There we go.
Okay. I don't know what I did, but I fixed it. Okay, so in-country competition. Here's a quick poll for you. I don't know if, Mark, you can throw this up quickly. Should we be worried about in-country competition? Yes or no? Does it make a difference to us? Interesting. So getting some resounding yeses coming through. Okay. Let me ask you the same question then. Are you worried about your competitors in this country? Do they bother you? Do they get on your nerves? I completely agree with you, Vanessa. Competition is an amazing thing. Yeah, Deborah, you need to be, no, not worried, but you need to be aware. Now, the point is that I'm making about this is that we can be concerned about in-country competition in as much as we think they've got a big advantage over us. They know that they have an advantage in terms of they know the culture, they know the language, they know the way business works in that country, and they know who the customers are out there. That's fine, no problem whatsoever. And I understand why we should be at least aware of that situation. However, just the same as dealing with people in this country where there may be competitors, we need to understand what we offer, but more importantly, we need to be able to demonstrate to our potential customers, to our prospects, that what we offer is of greater benefit than what the in-country competition offers. So I don't believe, personally, that we should be more worried about competitors in a target country beyond the UK shores because of those potential advantages they might have. We should be purely aware of them and use that knowledge and information to ensure that we are providing enough benefit that that customer, that potential customer, wants to talk to us about how we can provide our services in a bigger, better, more effective way than the in-country competitor. Okay, excellent. And the last one we're going to talk about is target data. But rather than do it on here, I'm going to come back to the slideshow, and we're going to talk about that as we go into the next section. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Vanessa. Make sure you're doing the market research to make sure you're not trying to penetrate a saturated market. Indeed, unless, of course, you have something that is completely innovative in that market, that is disruptive, it's going to change the market. In which case, fantastic, get in there. Okay, so let's go back, if we can, to our keynote. Okay, so preparation for international prospecting. Okay, so for me, when it comes to prospecting, attitude is everything. We have to have the right attitude in order to prospect effectively. And this doesn't matter whether you're talking to somebody in France, in China, in India, or somebody in the UK. Attitude is everything. We've got to, naturally, it's got to be positive. Our attitude, our positive attitude towards prospecting needs to be short and long term. Now, too many companies that I deal with see prospecting as a short-term activity. Okay, we're going to make some calls. We're going to hope we're going to get some appointments. We're going to get in there. We're going to do some business. And what that means is when that doesn't happen, when it doesn't happen in the short term, companies get disillusioned with it and they stop prospecting. Now, prospecting is a short and a long-term process. We can spend effective time, not just filling our pipeline for next month, but filling our opportunity pipeline for the month after, the month after, the month after, even for the year after. I have a pipeline myself, which is about 2 years long. Because of the nature of the business that I do, I know of customers that it'll be the right time to talk to them in January of next year, in July of next year, because of the plans they've got. We need to use prospecting as a way of developing a long-term pipeline and not see it as something that needs to be picked up or dropped just because it may or may not be giving us immediate results. Now, if we put ourselves in enough situations, give ourselves enough opportunities, we will create short-term opportunities, but the longer-term pipeline benefits are there to be had if we can keep our focus for the long term. In order to do that, we've got to be consistent. We cannot pick up and drop prospecting when we feel like it. We should, once we reach and understand the right way to prospect, then we do the right things regularly, consistently, making sure that we're consistently adding new opportunities into that pipeline. Which, as it means, by definition, it needs to be regular. But also, it needs to be financially beneficial. So if you are finding that your prospecting is not bringing you the results you need, it is not financially beneficial, you need to start looking at the aspects of prospecting. Number one, your methods and your processes. Maybe you're not doing it in the right way to make it financially beneficial, but maybe you're targeting the wrong places, the wrong kind of people. It's not going to bring you the return on investment from prospecting that you need it to do, which is why we need to measure it. We need to understand the amount of business, the value of the business that is coming from prospecting. Because if it's financially beneficial, then you and your salespeople will continue to push in the effort to bring that extra pipeline in. Okay, so start off, we're going to look at data and prospect list generation. This is the most important part of prospecting, is where do you start? Who are you targeting? So I'm going to set a few rules first. First of all, please avoid cold, unqualified lists. Okay? If you want to, you could go out there and you could buy a list of 1,000 targets in the country of your target market. And you could just sit and ring through them. You could phone them. You could send them direct mail. You could send them emails, all you like. But it could well be there's actually out that list of 1,000, there could only be, I don't know, 50 of them that actually could be potential customers. And out of those 50, your conversion rate may well turn out that you might only get in front of 1, 2, or 3 of those out of 50. The biggest issue is not the conversion rate from 50 good leads to 3 appointments. That's not a bad return. We can make it better, but it's not a bad return. The big issue is the 950 on that list that weren't your prospects in the first place. And that's the danger of using cold, unqualified lists. So if you're going to build a list, make sure it is refined and qualified to the best of your ability before you start prospecting. To do that, make sure you assess your ideal customer and benchmark your data against it. So look at the countries you want to be working in. Look at who the ideal customer would be in that country in terms of things like turnover, staff numbers, locations, all that kind of stuff. And benchmark whatever data you're creating or buying against that ideal customer. Avoid targeting a specific contact until that's been qualified with the receptionist. And again, I mean, you hear a lot of people, they think, okay, if I get a target list and I've got a target, the easiest thing for me to do is to ring up and say to the receptionist, oh, hello there, can I speak to Richard Palmer, please? And we think as salespeople, because we've got a name, it's going to get us through more rapidly. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The problem is you end up talking to this guy, Richard Palmer, that's on your list, and you find out that actually they're not the right person to be talking to. They don't know who the right person is. You've wasted your time and you're back to square one. There are ways that we can develop the right specific contact before we phone them up, before we start writing to them, in order to ensure we're using our time effectively. Your conversion rates to both appointment and then sale is highly impacted by the quality of your data. As I've just said, make sure your data is right, you'll get a higher conversion rate. And hold your data in an accessible CRM, which provides the ability to make notes, set tasks, send templated emails, and drive the prospecting process. If you've got an effective CRM, it can push your prospecting program really well, providing it's being used properly. Okay, so identifying your ideal customer, let's look at that. Evaluate your current customers. What is the profile of the ideal client? Now, for those of you who are already dealing in the countries that you want to expand into, you should have some data of your ideal customer in that country. For those of you who are looking to target a new country entirely, then benchmark your ideal clients from other sources, but you might have to adapt that slightly depending on the behaviors, upon the business setup in the particular country that you are looking to target. Consider industry, location, staff numbers, turnover, their marketplace. What's the average spend of your customers? Do you want to target new prospects who might spend at least this much or more? Or is any customer in that particular country effective for you in order to gain a foothold? So what I'm asking here is making sure that you are targeting companies that are going to bring you enough revenue to make that prospecting activity worthwhile. So look at the average spend of your customers, make sure you're targeting, in terms of the ideal customer, somebody that's going to give you a similar kind of income. Identify each of the sectors that your ideal current customers work in. And these give you your verticals. So it's much easier for you to, let's say you work in the medical industry, or a set of your customers are in the medical industry, for instance. It's so much easier to replicate that in another country because of your relevant experience, because there will be relevant social proof that you can deliver what you're promising you can deliver in another country, but in a similar marketplace. So wherever your strong verticals are, be it marketing, be it in, say, medical, be it in manufacturing, focus on those stronger verticals in order to translate that into another country. So using the ideas and techniques in the section, build a prospect list based on these ideal profiles. So let's have a look at this. The sources of international data. Of course, we can use Google. Naturally, I don't know if you've done any Google searching before, but it's really easy. There are so many places that generate lists for whatever particular reason. And Google can provide you with all sorts of at least cold starting lists, which you can then refine and refine and refine before you start making those phone calls. If you just Google something like manufacturing companies in France, you'd be amazed how many analytical businesses have created lists of the top 50, the top 100. And Google could be a good place to start. The problem I have with Google is that it's a bit too general. You've got to search through an awful lot of very unspecific data to try and find what you need. The next one is LinkedIn. Now, I'm just going to stop sharing my keynote for a second. Yep. Okay. Right. So let's have a look at this. Let's just say that you're going to put in a search into LinkedIn. LinkedIn is incredibly powerful, particularly if you have Sales Navigator for creating a relevant prospect list. So let's say that we are going to look for food manufacturing in Spain. Sorry, food manufacturing companies. Let's just put in food manufacturing to start with. So by hitting that search, it's now going through the whole of LinkedIn looking for, to start with, people in food manufacturing. We can now start to refine these results. So instead, we click more and we now go to companies instead. So now we have companies dealing with food manufacturing. It's only 21,000 results. That's no problem whatsoever. Okay, so interesting. There's a lot of people out there. Let's go back to people. And for people, we've only got 1.16 in results. So, you know, there's a hell of a data for you. We click on connections. We don't want the people that are in our first connection group because we already know them. Let's go for those people who are in our second or third connection group. So we don't know this. There's only 1.15 million. Now we can hit locations. So we said we wanted Spain. Let's go for Spain and apply that. Now we've got 9,700. We can also add in other filters here. So you can see in the filters, we got second and third. They're in Spain. We can search for specific companies if we wanted to. We could say, actually, what I don't want food overall. What I want is food production. So let's break it down that. We can even, coming back to our language conversations, look at breaking it down into a language profile. And there we go, we'll stick with those and we'll click apply on that. And now we have 877 results. And these are people-based results. Okay. So what we've now got, when you look at it, is a database of 877 people who are currently working in food manufacture in the country of our choice, which is Spain. What we could also do with this, I do believe, if I can find it, it's in here. Sorry, in Sales Navigator, for those of you who've got it, you can also, there is another box here where you can put in seniority level, you can put in a job description. So if you just want senior management, you can specify senior management and that's what it will give you. So here we go. We've got a lot of people that we could potentially talk to in Spain, in food manufacturing, 877. That would be a great starting point for building your data list. And not only do you have names of companies and locations, but you've also got people that you could target with their titles, which enables you to ascertain, are they a relevant target? Okay, brilliant. Good stuff. Can you also hear me? Somebody said that I'm muted. Somebody just give me a thumbs up that you can hear me.
You were, but you were muted when you went back onto the whiteboard, Richard.
Big bum. Okay. As long as you get this. Excellent. Let's promise I'll see the chat while I am on share. Okay, so going back to the sources. So we've got Google, we've got LinkedIn. I say LinkedIn, great place to find new data. Just a little bit of a heads up, there is an organization that I use called WeConnect, which is we-connect.io, which have some great automated processes for reaching out to LinkedIn customers. It's not to sell things, it's a way of kicking off conversations with people. Have a look at that, we-connect.io. They do a free trial and no credit cards required and all that kind of thing. It's really proving to be very effective. Yes, of course, you can buy data from data companies. There are big dangers in buying data from data companies. One is GDPR. There are a lot of unscrupulous data companies out there that are not working well with GDPR. There are a lot of companies in the UK that cannot provide effective international data. My strongest suggestion with data companies is go to one that's in country. Look for one in the country of target and make sure that you have vetted them effectively before you buy anything from them. Talk to existing customers of theirs, get some kind of feedback as to how reliable their data is, because it can be incredibly hit and miss. Naturally, you can go to the Department of International Trade, you can talk to trade attaché, you can talk to anybody that's in that structure of assisting you to export. They will have certainly data on places you can buy this data in, but they will also have lists of people working in certain industries in your country. Of course, talk to your current partners, your distribution partners, current customers. They will have an idea of who their competitors are. They may not want you approaching them, but there may be some that are a little bit more open-minded, might be able to give you some steer and some direct information. And, well, any others? Has anybody else got any thoughts on where else we can get some data from? Exhibitions, great one, Alex. Yeah, like the idea of that. Get out some exhibitions, pull some data in. Chambers of Commerce, good. Trade shows, yeah. Groups, trade shows. So you talk about specific groups there, Deborah. How about specific groups on LinkedIn that are targeting that industry in that country? Lovely. Open house events like that. Good stuff. I think there are lots of ways that we can pull good, effective, qualified data in. But as coming right back to the beginning of this section, data is no good unless it is qualified, it is refined, and you are maximizing your chances of everyone you want to talk to being in your target market. And yeah, Alex, webinar attendees, perfect. Okay. Again, I will reiterate to you, CRM in prospecting, using a customer relationship management system is essential in having an effective prospecting process. It's not just for sharing data or holding data rather, it's for ensuring that you are setting the right tasks to drive that prospect through the process, but also the right CRM will output to you your conversion rates, will tell you how many phone calls it's taking for you to get in to talk to somebody, how many letters you have to write, how many emails you've sent, how many phone calls, conversations it takes to turn it into an appointment. If you have the CRM set up in the right way, it can help you manage the whole process. Okay, so that's preparation for prospecting. We're going to come on to the contact processes now. Before we do that, there is one golden rule when it comes to prospecting. Prospecting is not about selling. Prospecting is about creating effective conversations. So everything we're going to talk about, these key methods, the idea of them is not to sell a product, but to get you into a situation where you can have a meaningful conversation with a potential customer, which will then lead to a sale. So of course, we can start with telephone prospecting. Absolutely. Now, if we think about telephone prospecting as an activity, it's something that is equally loved and hated by many, many salespeople. And there are salespeople that love picking up the phone. They love trying to talk to somebody, and particularly because they know it works and it works really well. And there are those people at the other extreme will avoid the telephone like the plague because we just, I don't like interrupting people. I don't want to be told no. I don't want to bug people. The key with this is those people who don't telephone prospect have probably tried it in the past and have probably done it in such a bad way, such a wrong way, that has created more rejection than positivity. And as a result of that, they've been totally turned off from it. Telephone prospecting still remains the most effective way of generating new prospects when you consider the amount of time you put into it compared with the result you get out of it. For me, I would much rather spend 2 hours on the telephone trying to book myself appointments than sending 100 letters, because I know it works. But the reason I know it works is because I have a system and a process that I've refined over many, many years, which delivers those results. Okay. Now, I haven't got time to go into that at the moment, and feel free to contact me afterwards if you want to know about it. But if you want to talk to people, if you want to get appointments and you want to get conversations moving, pick up the telephone and see what you do, see if you can get to speak to somebody. The thing is, every one of these processes needs to end up in a telephone conversation at some point or a Zoom conversation. So why not cut through everything else and just pick up that phone and try and talk to that person? Now, I am talking about in an ideal world, because in an ideal world, everybody's at work, everybody's on the telephone number that you expect them to be on, and you pick up the phone and the receptionist answers and they can put you through to the decision maker. Unfortunately, we don't deal in an ideal world at the moment. There are people scattered to 4 corners of the world, working at home, whatever it is that they're doing, and they are far less accessible by telephone. However, don't let that put you off. You may get through to fewer people by telephone prospecting at the moment, but when you do get through to them, you are more likely to turn it into what you need, as long as you have the right language, the right approach to get in to talk to that person. And the biggest tip I can give you when it comes to the language and approach to a prospect is friendly, relationship-based, conversation-based, not sales-based. So when you get through to somebody, generate a conversation by asking the right questions. We're going to talk about that, how we actually turn a conversation into an appointment a little bit later on. Okay. Digital prospecting. All right, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all that kind of thing. The thing is that a lot of people look at digital prospecting and they think what that means is I'm going to put some nice posts on LinkedIn, out on Twitter, out on Facebook, and hope people like and share it. And then as a result of that, somebody who wants to do business with me might see it and they might give me a call. That's not digital prospecting, that's digital advertising. Digital prospecting is deliberately targeting people and reaching out to them using digital platforms. So as I suggested earlier, you could use something like WeConnect, where a platform will send automatic connection requests with a message of your choice out to your target market. And those then that connect with you, you will then get a notification to say they've connected, and you can start a conversation. You can start saying, it's like, hello, and thank you for accepting my connection request. I seem to work in a similar market to you. I really welcome the opportunity to have a conversation about what you do and tell you a bit about what I do. If you have that more casual approach, you will generate a large number of conversations. And those conversations can then develop digitally into something meaningful, which then can convert itself into a telephone or a Zoom conversation. However, there are many, many people out there doing digital prospecting with automated systems, which the minute you accept and you say, yeah, I'll connect to you, you get a sales message drop into your inbox. And so many people are doing it, and so many people hate that approach. So if you're going to do this and you're going to use an automated system, make sure that your first message once they've connected to you is far more conversational, far more relationship based. Hi, I'd love to get to know you. Hi, this is what I do. What do you do? That kind of approach, not, by the way, I've got 50% off of my widgets just because you're in France and it's a new market. Would you like to buy some? Okay, so take care over the language that you're using when it comes to digital prospecting. Okay, now here's something that I find really, really effective. And this can be used particularly with digital prospecting or with email or even with direct mail. And that's what we call a captivating article. Now, the way this works is if you write an article, an interesting article that is relevant to the target market that you're sending it to, but this article is about problems and issues that they may face, things that they may have difficulties with that you know your product or your service can solve. The idea here is that by writing a captivating article, we are demonstrating our knowledge and credibility of the marketplace and demonstrating our empathy with that market, that we understand their issues, they understand the challenges that they are facing. Now, what these articles should do is demonstrate and discuss these problems and these issues, but it shouldn't solve the problems. You shouldn't explain how you would solve it. It's not a sales document. What it is, it's a document to invite conversation. So you write the article, make sure it's only one A4 slide, make sure it's engaging and you've got an engaging title. And then you can use that to, as I said, to demonstrate that credibility, but with a tagline at the bottom saying, we would love to discuss how our solution might help you solve these issues. If you've identified with them, when would be the best time to talk? Or I'll give you a call in a couple of days' time and we'll talk it through. I've got a couple of captivating articles that I'm more than happy to share. If you contact me afterwards, my contact details will come up at the end. I can send you through one or two captivating articles to give you an idea of how to construct it. But to give you, for instance, one of the key articles that I use, titled, "Having a Poor Prospecting Culture Can Damage Your Business and Create Stress and Uncertainty." Now, many of my customers have come from reading that headline and thinking, yeah, I don't have a great prospecting culture. And yeah, it does cause stress. It does cause uncertainty. They read the article and they understand from that article that I know the problems they're facing. And as a result of that, they want to talk to me about the solutions. So, okay, so Andrew's saying we get good quality inquiries through our website. Not many, but they're very good qualified leads. The brilliant thing about website inquiries coming in, of course, is they've pre-qualified themselves. You know, they've done a Google search and they've decided, yeah, I want that product, and these people look like good people to do business with, so I'm gonna focus in on there. So yeah, really good. Downside is it's the volume of them, isn't it? Okay, so a bit about the captivating article, write an article about common challenges faced by customers in your industry that your product or service can solve. Make sure it highlights only the problems faced and the impact, not the solutions, and give it a captivating one-line heading. Then what we do with this is, for instance, using LinkedIn, this is a LinkedIn process. Connect to a prospect. A few days after the connection, send them a message saying something similar to this. Hi, many thanks for connecting and being part of my network. I've written an article titled, put the title in there. Thought you might like to read it. Would you like me to send you a copy? And the fact is, because it's relevant to their market, you often get a yes back. So if the answer is yes, you ask for them an email address and you send it over, asking for some feedback as to how the issues highlighted them. The reason we ask for an email address rather than sending a link on LinkedIn is that when and if that customer responds to you saying, thank you for the article, I found it really interesting, you'll have all their contact details coming on the bottom of the email. So if you get a response, engage further, try to convert to a phone call to discuss how your solution can help. And you can even use that with your existing email database, send it out via email to invite conversations. And this is all prospecting is. It's about creating conversations. The beautiful thing about using a captivating article with an international audience, of course, is that we can translate them. We don't have to rely on it being in English. As long as we've got a reliable translation process where we know the translation is effective, then writing an article could be a great way of hitting those markets where English is not the first language. Of course, we've got international networking. We've already talked about some of that. We've got chamber events. We've got DIT events. We can go in country and have events potentially hosted by trade attaches in embassies. There are all sorts of different ways we can do that, but there are ways we can network internationally sitting at our desks. We've got groups in LinkedIn are particularly effective, particularly country-specific groups where you can demonstrate your knowledge and your credibility in a marketplace in a relevant group without leaving the comfort of your home. Okay. This one's not particularly relevant as we speak at the moment because none of us can really travel. But when you do, and you do get out to see customers in the country that you're targeting, don't waste the opportunity to go and knock on the doors of other potential customers that you haven't yet managed to talk to. There is no substitute for walking in to a reception, explaining who you are, asking to leave some information and asking for a contact detail in reply. Get a business card back, leave a letter, leave something of introduction, and then follow it up 2 or 3 days later. I'm not specifically saying that you should jump on a plane and go to a particular city and knock on every door that's relevant. What I'm saying here is when you are there conducting appointments that you've already set up, don't miss the opportunity to knock on other doors. Use the time effectively to prospect for more. Okay. Direct mail. This is an interesting one, and this is something that many companies have gone away from dramatically because we've got email and we've got LinkedIn, and isn't that fantastic? And isn't it cheap? And we can do so much in so little time. It's an interesting thing. A very good friend of mine works for a company who does direct mail services. And I've been talking to him about some analysis in the last week or two. What's interesting is that the average shelf life of an email is about 3 minutes. So an email will arrive in a prospect's inbox, and it might get read, it might not get read. If it does get read, it might be kept or it might be deleted. But the average shelf life of an email is 3 minutes. It will sit in an inbox for a maximum of 3 minutes on average. What's interesting about direct mail is it has a shelf life of 17 days. Somebody receives a letter, on average, it will sit on their desk for 17 days, giving them a continuous reminder of what it is that you've written to them and how and you can do to help them. Direct mail, because it is so rare now in a business-to-business environment, it's probably becoming an incredibly effective way of mailing to people, of getting attention, of getting engaged conversations. Now, I have a very particular way of doing this, and I call it the red letter system. So here's what you do. You write a letter. That letter is all about what you want to talk to this customer about, the key benefits that you bring to that marketplace, what you can do for them in terms of can you make them money? Can you save them money? Can you save them time? Can you give them peace of mind? All of that kind of thing. What you do is you make that as personal as you can. You handwrite the name at the top and you sign it in ink at the bottom. But the key to this is when you fold it up, you put it into a bright red envelope, okay? And then you handwrite the address on the front, and then you post it. I've been using this system for years and years, and it works so well. And the reason it works so well is, first of all, the goal of any mail, be it email or direct mail, is to get it opened. Everybody opens the bright red letter with the handwritten address on the front, because maybe they think it's something personal, maybe they think it's a party invite, or whatever it may be. It's not a bill, it's not a circular. At least that's what it looks like. Once it gets opened, the personal nature of the way that you've written it will get most of it read, hopefully all of it read. The other advantage of it is when you ring up 2 days later to follow it up, you call them and you say, after 2 days, I'm just calling up, want to talk to Richard Palmer. I'm the guy who sent him the red letter. And I get through so many times by using this process. And yet, Mike, good point there. It goes against your sustainability promise. How do you see it? It depends on the level you're doing it at. For me, I do this at a very, very low level. So I will pick something like every month, maybe 15 key targets I will use this process on. And these are the targets I really, really want to talk to, the ones that are my ultimate targets. Because you're right, I don't want to send a whole load of post. It's one of those things. You can, of course, refrain from doing any direct mail. You can just do everything electronically. The problem is your message stands so much risk of getting lost in the ether, in the static that's out there. Yeah, minimal but effective. Absolutely, definitely. Okay, so don't ignore direct mail. It's a highly effective way of getting to people, and that shelf life, 17 days sitting on the desk. And if you send something with it, a little bit of collateral, you know, a business card, or maybe something that they're going to retain, it could work even more. I know of somebody that was trying to get into a particular market in construction. What they did was they decided that they would send a little box, and that little box had inside it a little Lego building blocks. And their message was all about how they could help these construction companies to build more effective properties. Can't remember exactly what it meant, but the little box with the Lego inside and the little message hit home to so many people. Pretty much everybody got sent to opened it, saw the company's message, and then as a result, took the follow-up phone call 2 days later. The opportunities grew exponentially just because a little bit of care was taken over. What are we going to send these people to grab their attention? Okay, brilliant. So you've got some methods there of getting in and talking to people. The key here is if you've got the data set right and you've got your approach right, you will manage to get conversations with a higher percentage of people. The more conversations you're getting, the more opportunity you're going to turn them into appointments. But we're going to talk now about that conversation, about how do we go from actually having access to a decision maker, having a conversation, and turning it into an effective appointment. Excuse me. Okay, so picture the scene. We phoned up, we're either following up some direct mail or we're following up an initial phone call or an email, and we talk to the receptionist and they put us through and the decision maker picks up the phone. Okay, we're at that point now. The key to what we need to achieve is change. We need to give our prospect, person we've just started talking to, a reason to consider change. So this is what we're going to do. We've got to provoke it. And that's not a bad thing. It's not an aggressive thing, but we need to nudge people into the idea that change might be a good thing. Now, there's only two reasons why anybody changes anything ever. And the first one is because what they've got is currently broken. The supplier they're working with is causing them some pain. It could be that the relationship doesn't work quite as well as it should do. It could be the service isn't quite as good. It could be the price has become an issue. Whatever it may be, there is a problem within that supplier relationship. And what we need to do is understand if that's broken or not, and how we might provoke our potential customer into considering a change to us. If something's not broken, if that relationship's not broken, the only reason why this supplier might want, or this customer might want to talk to us, is because we could do something that's better. We can improve upon their current situation, either by helping them to maximize on an opportunity they've got, or improving the service that they're receiving, maybe improving efficiency perhaps, that we can bring greater benefits than their current supplier. And of course, that we can bring greater profits to them. So if you consider that anybody that you're going to try and work with, let's say in a business-to-business environment, more than likely they've already got a supplier for what it is that you want to sell them. The only way we're going to get them to move to you or even consider moving to you is if they admit that they've got problems with the current supply, or that your supply could provide them with greater benefits, therefore opening their minds to having a conversation. So that's where we need to get to with our conversation. That's the goal for this discussion, is can we discover is something broken or could it be done better? So what we need to do is create conversations. Now, for those of you who have been in sales before and done sales training, we know that open questions create conversation. Open questions being defined as questions that start with who, where, why, what, when, or how, and that logically can't be answered yes or no. But the great thing is about open questions create conversation. Conversations then build information. We get knowledge from those conversations. And the more knowledge we have, the more opportunities are created. If we don't have much knowledge, there are very few opportunities in there. The greater that information base, the greater the opportunities coming through. And those opportunities then lead to sales. So basically, open questions equal sales. So as soon as you get the decision maker on the phone, what I want you to focus on is asking the right open questions to generate a conversation about their business. And I would suggest that you make notes of the kind of questions they're going to use before you get into the conversation. Okay, so these open questions invite information to be given and help to avoid yes/no answers, which stall the conversation. So we've got the who, where, why, what, when, how, and yes, who, where, why, what, when, and how. Those are the kind of words that we need to use in order to spark off these conversations. But I'm just going to give that some context, give you some ideas when we're talking about provoking change. So remember, among the conversation, we're looking for reasons that the prospect might consider changing supplier or changing their current way of doing things to give motivation for an appointment. So among your usual qualification questions, discovering what they buy, when, how often, and from whom, you also need to include questions that will help you understand if there is any pain or if any opportunities exist. Because without either of those two, there is no reason for this prospect to give you time, to give you an appointment. So here's a really simple idea, simple, basic way. Here are 4 questions that will help you in most conversations where the prospect has an existing supplier. Quite simply, who is it? What do you like about dealing with them? Now, it sounds counterintuitive because you want to replace that supplier or even go in side by side with them, which means normally we'd want to know what's wrong with that relationship. But the problem is, if we start asking questions that focus on the negative immediately, you're going to end up in an adversarial situation. You're going to be, your prospect might even shut down because, you know, they like this current supplier. Yes, there might be problems, but they like them personally. So avoid being negative in your first question. What do you like about dealing with them? And of course, it gives you a baseline. If you can't do what they like about dealing with that current supplier, you've got little chance of motivating any change. Okay, what do you like about dealing? It puts the conversation on a positive. What it does mean is that if the customer answers that, you can legitimately ask the balanced question, the other side of the coin. So what don't you like about it? If they say something here, it could indicate a point of pain that needs resolving. Well, I don't like the fact their deliveries are quite slow. I don't like the fact that they charge me so much for my delivery because of the distances involved. whatever it may be, it could indicate a point of irritation, a point of problem, which could then lead you into a conversation which explains how you could improve upon that. And the third question, which we particularly use if there's something they don't like, well, what, if anything, do you think they could do better? You might like them, but what could they improve upon? And the answer here could show you what opportunities might be able to create for the prospect if they change to you. So they could say something like, well, they could look at the way they package it, because if we could go from 2 deliveries a week down to 1 delivery a week because they change the packaging, it makes it smaller, then perhaps we could save money with warehousing. Whatever it might be, that's just an idea off the top of my head. There could be opportunities for you to demonstrate your improved benefits that would open up that conversation and that person's mind to potentially changing to you. Okay, good. But then we've also got things like leading questions. Now, leading questions, this is a very in-depth conversation. I'm just literally going to give you a brief overview of the use of leading questions. The idea of a leading question is that they assess and build desire to change. There's only one logical answer. You usually know what that logical answer is likely to be, and they can lead directly to an appointment. So here's an example. Let's just say, take the example I've just given of, well, we get 2 deliveries a week. We'd like it to be 1 delivery, but we currently get 2 because the packaging is so bulky, it has to go on 2 pallets, therefore 2 deliveries. Using leading questions, which are generally things like what impact, what effect, what difference, how important, we can examine that issue in depth. So tell me, what impact does it have on your business when you having these 2 deliveries a week? Now, I know what the logical answer to that would be. The logical answer is, well, it means I've got 2 inbound deliveries, which means my staff are now occupied twice as long as I want them to be receiving those deliveries. It's bigger packaging, which means I've got more storage space used up, which is costing me money. It's costing me time because of those 2 deliveries. Okay, so tell me, what difference would it make if you did only have 1? How much of a difference would it make? Well, 1 delivery would halve the time involved. Therefore, it would potentially halve the cost of staff for that delivery. We can actually reduce our storage costs. We could use that storage space for something else, making us more efficient, which could increase our productivity and potentially even increase our profits. Okay, so how important is it to you that you change this? Well, it's very important to me. Okay, in that case, the best thing I can do is I can put together some ideas for you. Let's have a better conversation about this. Book an appointment, let me see you, whatever it is you want to say, and let's work out how we can solve this. It's amazing how just finding out that little bit of detail, that little bit of an issue that customer might be facing their current supplier, use leading questions just to understand that full impact, but more importantly, to help the customer understand that impact and admit that impact. Suddenly the door becomes open for an appointment. Again, this is something that I can go to in much more depth if you want to contact me after the program. So, quick example, qualifying question, for instance, here. This is from my world. How often do your salespeople miss their targets? And the answer is probably at least half the time. Okay, so my leading question would be, well, what impact does that have on your sales and profits? Naturally, we know it's going to be a problem. So follow up to that. So what effect does it have on motivation and morale? What impact would it have if they hit their sales targets all the time? So we've now moved to the positive. And how important is it that you fix this problem? By the time we get there, if the customers say, yes, this is really important that I fix this problem, or it's really important that I take this opportunity that potentially could be provided, the door for an appointment is wide open. So this could lead directly to closing for an appointment. But that's exactly what we do for our clients. The best thing I can do is pop in to see you. When's best for you, this week or next? Best thing I can do is arrange a proper Zoom meeting. When's good for you, this week or next? Best thing I can do is get my in-country representative to come and see you. When's good for you, this week or next? It's such a simple process, but it only works through asking open questions, which develops information. The information creates an opportunity because we understand they've either got a problem, a point of pain, or there is something that could be done to improve their situation. using leading questions to understand the negative and positive impact of that. And as soon as they can see that it's an important thing to fix, we have an opportunity for an appointment. Okay, brilliant. So, making time for sales. Absolutely vital here that you make regular time for prospecting. The best businesses that I deal with have scheduled time in their diaries every week, be it for 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and it's the same time every single week. And not only are they scheduling this time, but they are preparing their data ahead of that time, and they are making sure that their whole environment is managed. So they're turning off their emails. They're telling their colleagues that they can't be disturbed for the next 2 to 3 hours. They are getting themselves fit and ready for their prospecting activities, whether that's an hour's worth of telephone calls, whether it's an hour's worth of LinkedIn activity, but it is a focused, regular, weekly activity which drives that pipeline through. If you are not prepared to put specific time in your diary for prospecting, and of course, we have to adjust it depending on time zones that we're targeting. If you're not prepared to do that, I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't bother prospecting at all, because you will end up doing it in a knee-jerk reaction way, which doesn't drive the results that you want to drive, and therefore you will get disillusioned with it. If you spend a focused hour, 2, 3 hours a week on it, you will see that the quality of what you do improves. That will produce a much better result, which will keep you motivated for doing more and more and more, and drive that prospecting program through. So make it fixed in your diary, make it regular, make it focused, make it effective. So weekly calling sessions, minimum 2 hours a week, preferably on a Monday or a Friday, more if you can. The only reason I say Monday or Friday is that many people like to be doing appointments on a Tuesday, Wednesday or Thursday. Entirely up to you. I tend to conduct my calling hours as a power hour. So as I say, I'm preparing the data before the session, no distractions of any kind allowed. And I focus on making 15 calls an hour, which if we're doing 2 hours a week is 30 a week. Or I'm sending 15 emails out, or I'm making 15, trying to generate 15 conversations on LinkedIn. Whatever your activity, give it that kind of focus. Make sure you're updating your CRM and setting follow-up tasks immediately after each call. Then you should be scheduling your follow-up calls. So you make an initial phone call to a potential customer, you find out who that might be. You might send an email if you found out the email address for that person. Make sure you're booking a follow-up appointment into your CRM. Give them a call 2 days later. If you send a LinkedIn message and you don't get a reply, try making a phone call 2 days later. If you send a letter, schedule a phone call, follow up for 2 days after you expect them to receive that letter. Whatever it is, you've got to have a follow-up in your diary for every activity. And finally, please make sure that you are measuring and managing your systems. So many companies that I deal with, we set up measurement processes within their CRM system. Excuse me. Yeah, we set up measurement processes within our CRM system, which tells them the effectiveness of each of their activities. How many phone calls have they got to make in order to achieve a certain number of appointments? How many letters do they send? How many direct LinkedIn messages? And what are the conversion rates? Because what we then want to do is be able to analyze which is the most effective route to market, and then do more of that. Which isn't working so well, which means we can then analyze why it's not working well and either discard it as an activity or find a way to improve it. Please measure and manage your whole system as you go through. And as a result of what we've talked about now, can you please put together an action plan, put together some ideas, some plans about what you're going to do in terms of your international prospecting and driving this process through. And don't forget, Mark's going to put my contact details up in a little bit. I am very happy to field any questions. If you want to email me, phone me, whatever it may be, I'm more than happy to help with not only some questions about what we've talked about here, but also further deeper advice if you want to. This has really been very much a scratch the surface webinar. I have a lot more information if you need it. So let's move on to Q&A session. So there we go. Has anybody got questions? If you can put them into the chat, I will answer them as we go. Okay.
I think you got sent through some questions. If there isn't any that have come up, Richard, if you just want to read them out.
Yeah, I've got a couple here.
Perfect.
You have a very specific target group. How do you feel about something like SurveyMonkey? The problem I've got with some things like SurveyMonkey is they don't really engage a conversation. You get some feedback from your target market, assuming that people will do that. And the difficulty as well is how many? What's the conversion rate from sending out a survey to getting a response? And as a result of that response, how many of those are true prospects? I don't know. I would worry about that as an activity. I think you could spend a lot of time and money building a SurveyMonkey process. You then also have to make sure you've got the right email addresses for the right targets. In which case you're going to have to do a lot of qualification before you send the SurveyMonkey out. And then I think you've done all that work, and 95% of the people you send it to aren't going to respond. I would much rather do all that qualification work and then pick up the phone and ask them the questions, because I think you get a lot more conversation going, you get a lot more going through. Perhaps if you want to use a questioning process like that, perhaps use LinkedIn and send it direct rather than a SurveyMonkey, which is obviously a blast to lots of people. Send one email or one message through LinkedIn to somebody. I'm interested in your feedback on this because, I work in your marketplace. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And see if you can generate a conversation on LinkedIn that way. Sales Navigator. That's a tricky one. I have, on several occasions, I have indulged in Sales Navigator. The only thing that I found it particularly useful for is the quality of the searches you can get back. So with Sales Navigator, you can go into a lot more detail to refine the search that we were looking at on the screen earlier, and therefore get a better data set coming out of it. I've never really found the process of being able to tag people and follow what they do and which companies they move to and all that kind of thing particularly useful, to be honest with you, because I know my clients and I know my prospects and I know where they're moving to, so it didn't really benefit me. The great thing about Sales Navigator, of course, is you can get a month free trial to see if it fits you. I know of some salespeople who absolutely swear by it, but I think a lot of it depends on the marketplace and the type of people that you want to talk to. So Frederick says, looking at the average cost of sending direct mail to international prospective clients, would you still advise this technique for international prospecting? I would, but as mentioned earlier, minimal use for high value targets. The one, maybe you've got somebody you've been really trying to get hold of on the telephone or trying to get into LinkedIn and it's just not working. Maybe you just send them that letter, that big red letter that's going to open that door. Maybe you use it as a last resort to get to talk to somebody that you really want to talk to who's been avoiding everything that you've sent so far. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't advise it as being a blanket, operation. Okay, anything else? Just scrolling back to see if there are any questions that I haven't answered on the chat.
So I've got one of how can we be sure we're okay with GDPR?
That's an excellent question. Okay, the first and foremost is if you're buying data, then make sure that you are buying it from a reliable GDPR approved source. Now, each country will have their own version of this. However, in the UK, for instance, there's a company I deal with based down in Devon called CorpData, who have amazing GDPR protection processes, even to the extent, because they generate their own data, that once every week you get an update of the file of all those people who have contacted them to remove themselves from their database to make sure you're not sending unopted out data out. So the other issues, the only advice I can give you with GDPR, because I am not a qualified GDPR person, and I will state on the record now in the recording, go and get your own legal advice. There are a number of GDPR consultants out there that are excellent at understanding this. And of course, the laws are slightly different depending on which country you're dealing with. I can't give you more specific advice than that because I'm just not legally qualified to do so. I'm sorry if that's a bit of a cop-out, but there you go. So Steve says, we distribute a product globally and all our current distributors are from different backgrounds and different industries. We're not sure where to start looking. Okay. I would suggest that you start looking at, it's really difficult without knowing your product and your marketplace, Steve, but I would suggest that the best place to start looking is understanding who it is you want that distributor to be selling to. Who is the end client? Who are the ones that are going to be buying the product? And then working back to, well, which distributors in that marketplace have enough of that market to make them worthwhile going to. So maybe the market research needs to come from the end consumer into, well, who are the distributors that they're buying from in order to understand who are the right players in that process. A difficult one, that's Steve. If you want to have a longer conversation off of here about it, I'd be more than happy to help.
I've also got a question from Harold of how efficient is in percentage is the direct call?
Now that again depends on a number of different factors. So the quality of the data you've got in the first place, the quality of your process. There is a particular process that I developed and I teach, and I developed it about 9 years ago, and it's incredibly effective. Let's say, for instance, that we use the typical telesales person's approach, and we pick up the phone, and whoever answers the phone at the other end, we say, to use my language, hello, can I speak to the person who deals with your sales training, please? Now, by using those words, and I hear them time and time again, what we're doing immediately is flagging up to that receptionist. We have no relationship with that company. We don't know who we need to speak to. Therefore, we must be selling something. As a result of that, you get the instinctive reply from the receptionist, which is not interested, go away, don't take sales calls, no names policies, whatever it may be. I have a process now. Under that process, if you rang 100 companies, I think you'd be lucky if you'd be really lucky to get through to 5 or 10 decision makers, and out of that, you might book yourself 1 or 2 appointments. But obviously, it does change dramatically depending on the marketplace and the quality of the data that you're starting with. If you use my system, I have proven over many, many years that number goes from, instead of 2 to 5 appointments booked, that goes to 10 to 15 appointments booked. And the reason it does that is because we go to up to between 20 and 30 decision makers access from 100 phone calls. And that's just because we're using a different approach, something that's much more consultative, something much more friendly, much more approachable, which drives the results through the system. And I'm more than happy to talk to people about how that works if you contact me afterwards. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having you with us. Any more questions, Mark?
No, nothing from my end. I just wanted to say quickly, thank you very much, Richard, for today and for your time and your expertise. And thank you ever so much, everyone else, for joining us today. From Business West and from the Department for International Trade Southwest, thank you very much. And we've got all of our other events that are coming up online, so please do take a look at that. We've also got a poll that's on your screen now. So if you could just fill that out, it just helps us to put in to put in the right events, which will help you and your business. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Lovely to meet you all. And please get in touch if you need any help.